The Conquer Worry Show, episode number 24. Welcome to the Conquer Worry Show, the show dedicated to helping people who struggle with their minds. If you are looking for stories of resilience, if you are looking for inspiration, or you simply want to conquer worry, this is the show for you.
Welcome to another episode of the Conquer Worry Show. I am your host, Jay Coulter, and today we have Nina Bingham joining us for a discussion on anxiety. Now, Nina holds a couple of degrees in psychology as well as a master's degree in mental health counseling. She has been in private practice since 2003, and she is also the author of several books, including a workbook on anxiety called Never Enough. Nina, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jay. I'm glad to be here.
So I gave a little bit of your professional background. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself personally before we get started?
Okay. Well, my very favorite thing to do when I'm not working is kayaking, because I live in the great Northwest here in Oregon, and we've got beautiful mountains and lakes and rivers, and I don't do any sea kayaking, but I absolutely love to take a day and take my dog, and we get in the kayak and just go and, spend the day on the water. I love the water. I've always loved the water. So when I didn't find kayaking until I was too late. I wish I'd found it early on, but I found it in my 40s, and so when I'm not working, that's what I do. I'm on the water. You'll find me on the water kayaking.
So what kind of dog do you have?
I have a little terrier. His name's Romeo, and he kind of looks a little bit like Toto from The Wizard of Oz.
That's great. And he doesn't jump in the water?
No, he actually is kind of afraid of the water. He's a rescue dog, so he's kind of afraid of everything. But I have conditioned him to the kayak, so he'll get in the kayak with me, and he's got his little doggy life vest on. He just doesn't jump in the water.
That's great, a doggy life vest. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, they have them.
All right, so let's talk about anxiety. That's why you're on the show today.
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend to somebody when they're starting to feel an anxiety attack or a panic attack coming on? What do you recommend they do?
Well, there's a couple of strategies. I've had this question in the 11 years that I've been a life coach and a hypnotherapist. I hear the same sort of questions about overcoming anxiety, and this is one that I hear a lot. So it's important to know what coping strategies you're going to use in advance before the next episode of anxiety hits, because once that adrenaline is pumping through your body, it's too late then to figure out what you're going to do, because anxiety can be so overwhelming. So I suggest that people create their own little list of things to do. So in the moment when you're triggered and the anxiety or the panic is coming on, you can just sort of, go to your list and remember, okay, step one, I'm supposed to do this, because unfortunately, anxiety sort of hijacks our rational thinking. So in the workbook that I wrote, I've included a long list of sort of coping methods, what I call putting together a crisis kit. These are just surefire techniques to use anytime your regular coping methods aren't effective. So I'll just share a couple of ideas from that. The first is a breathing technique. This is called urge surfing. So how you do it, Jay, is when you feel the panic or you feel the anxiety coming on, you're getting triggered, you want to sit down, kind of get yourself away from the TV and distractions in a quiet room and relax as much as you can and take some deep breaths in and out and just kind of get yourself into that calmer place, thinking in on the in-breath and then you think out on the out-breath. And what you want to try to do is shift your focus from the anxiety and anxious feelings to focusing solely on the breath. And this technique takes some practice, but it can be very effective. So the idea is that you want to just surf that urge to panic until it's reduced and until you're feeling calm again. So you just want to breathe through it, basically, and this is called meditative breathing for people who meditate.
Okay.
The second thing that I found really helpful in managing anxiety is creating what I call a safety zone. So when you begin to feel anxious, you want to have already identified what's comforting for you. So for me, I know that when I'm in my cozy pajamas, and if I grab a blanket and kind of bundle up in it, that makes me feel more secure. And, I was thinking about this, why is it that sort of bundling up with a blanket makes me feel more secure and kind of reduces the anxiety? And I think it's just a basic human need to sort of feel that security physically around us. So just to have the blanket around you, or some people kind of get in their jammies and kind of tuck under the covers, and maybe watch some TV to distract themselves. But the idea here is you want to do whatever is going to make you feel most secure. And for some people, that might not be the jammy in the bed. It might be taking a soothing bath. For other people, they might want to listen to some of their favorite music that's sort of more positive or calming. For other people, like I have a family member who has an anxiety disorder. And he's had this anxiety disorder all his adult life, and it's been really paralyzing for him. And what he shared with me works best for him is that when he feels the panic attack coming on, he just takes off and goes for a walk. He just says, okay, guys, I'm getting out of here. The four walls are closing in. And he'll walk for miles. He'll walk until he's like totally fatigued and just like his tongue hanging out the side of his mouth. But by the time he gets home, he said, it's gone. I've walked it off. And he's even gone at night. He just takes off and goes walking. And for him, that's what works best. So I think you have to find out what's comforting for you, and that's what you need to do.
I could definitely relate to that. You and I have spoken about the crisis kit before this interview, and I think if I had to build one and articulate it, exercise would be number one. The minute I can tell I'm starting to struggle, I go for a run, go to the gym, and it's amazing how much perspective you have after it. But even more amazing is how much academic research there is showing that that is what you should do and how few people do it.
Yeah, and it's because we don't like to get out of our comfort zones, but it really is true that if we'll make that extra effort to either force ourselves to get in the car and go to the gym, or just force ourselves to pull on our tennies and get out, for the half-a-mile walk, it does go away. It does lift. The clouds lift.
So based on your experience, why do you think some people struggle with this while other people don't?
Well, I think depression and anxiety, research shows that it's oftentimes genetic. So if you have a family member, like in my family, my great-grandma was actually institutionalized because she had such severe depression. And then it kind of came down the line to my dad, and he was a bipolar, or what used to be called manic depression. And he struggled with depression so badly that he started drinking and, used to sort of self-medicate with alcohol. And then it passed down to me. And I have to take an antidepressant because if I don't, I can't get out of bed. So it's you can see, and then actually I passed it on to my teen daughter, Jay, who was severely depressed. And at the age of 11, I mean, when you see, kids at 11 being severely depressed like that, oftentimes if you look at the family, you can see there's a genetic component to it.
Sure. So with regards to your daughter at 11, did you notice it or did somebody else bring it to your attention? How did that come about?
Yeah. No, I definitely noticed it. She lost her father at age 11. He died of what's called Lou Gehrig's disease, or ALS. It's a muscular, it's actually a neurological disease that affects the muscles or the muscular system of the body. And so anyway, he died, and they were very, very close. They were soulmates, really. And when he died at age 11, I mean, it was like her world just ended. And so she began a grieving process that she never really pulled out of, Jay. She just kind of went into a nosedive. And so, when I saw that the grieving process wasn't getting better, in fact, it was getting worse, that's when I realized, wow, I've got a kid here who is depressed now, clinically depressed, and, needs some intervention. She needs to go to counseling, or she needs to get on some medication, but something needs to be done because she was definitely in a nosedive after that.
What, looking at the need to get help through that lens is a lot more acute than somebody in general. When you're talking to your clients, how do you encourage them to go get help or let them know, hey, it's time to go get help?
Right. Well, I think the point at which it's time to get help is when it's interfering with your everyday life. In other words, if you can't get up and go to work, if you can't get out of bed because you're so hopeless and feeling so helpless that you can't, go to school, you can't go to work, if it's really interfering with your relationships, then that's the point at which, you might want to consider, seeking out the advice of a doctor. Because, really we don't need to let these symptoms sabotage our lives. There is medication out there. And so you just have to push yourself when you're like that to tell someone and say, it might be time for me to talk to a doctor about my options. And, let a friend go with you or ask a family member. I know that when I was so severely depressed, I remember just talking on the phone with my friend, and she could tell by my voice. She said, can you even get out of bed right now? And I said, I honestly have not been out of bed for a week. I've not gotten dressed. I've not taken a shower. And she said, I'll be right over. And, she was just an amazing friend because what I couldn't do for myself, she did for me. She intervened. She kind of stepped up and said, let's go, get your clothes on, we're going to the doctor. And I didn't want to go, because here I was studying psychology. I'm studying to be a mental health care practitioner. And I was so, well, of course you have guilt feelings when you're depressed. You feel hopeless and helpless, and you don't want anybody to see you like that. And certainly not if you're in school studying to be a therapist. And so there was just a tremendous sort of, shameful feelings for me around it. But she was just like, look, Nina, you know very well, you studied it, that this is a genetic, biological problem. This is a medical problem, Nina. You just need a pill. Let's go. And so I guess what I'd say to the listeners is if you have a friend who is having trouble getting out of bed, is having trouble getting to school, is having trouble showing up at work, they might need that helping hand to get them to the doctors or to get them to the counseling office. That's where they need to be. So sometimes that's what you do as a friend. You just jump in and you just do what needs to be done.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah.
So for people who are struggling, sometimes the negative thoughts and the compulsive worrying can just be overwhelming, almost to the point where you won't go get help because you're so overwhelmed. Do you have any advice to stopping that process, either early on or even after it's fully grown?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think ignoring or denying, like I was talking about, I just kind of wanted to deny that for a week I hadn't been able to pull myself out of bed to get to work. Ignoring or denying that we're excessively worried isn't going to make it go away. These things don't just go away because they're genetic and they're neurological. Our brain is causing us a problem. So the first step, Jay, is just admitting that we've got these negative thoughts and we've got these anxious feelings and that they're not going away and that they're sabotaging us. And just to kind of get over it, right? Get over ourselves. Just stop being embarrassed and stop trying to hide what's really going on. Because you can't live in the shadow of a problem and then expect it not to haunt you. So you've got to bring it out into the light and be willing to do something about it is sort of half the battle.
Sure.
So being willing to ask your friend, do you think you could give me a lift to the doctor's office and just kind of, hang out with me while we do this together? That first step is the hardest step to take. It was Martin Luther King Jr. that said this. He said, you don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step, right? But sometimes it's that first step that's the hardest step. I think there's a couple other things, too, that can help is that just educating yourself, so getting as much information as you can about your problem. If you feel that you might have an anxiety disorder or if you feel that you might be depressed or have some other mental illness issues going on, I mean, there's tons of assessments that you could even take online in the privacy of your own home. No one has to know about it. But you want to educate yourself and arm yourself with as much information as you can.
Yeah. You're talking our language there with educating yourself. That in our opinion is the first step.
Yeah. And then I suggest not going it alone. I mean, whether that's using a book at home to learn from, or finding a counselor that you feel comfortable talking to, or just letting someone in who can be there for you. Just consider getting some support, because research shows that people who get support have less symptoms and feel more hopeful than people who go it alone. So in other words, the outcome is much, much better when they have someone next to them supporting them.
Now, I know you believe that confidence is very important to somebody who is struggling. What are your thoughts on ways that somebody who is struggling could build their confidence?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, I think you need to realize that I want to normalize this situation of having an anxiety disorder or having depression or having some other mental illness situation going on in your life. So many Americans are struggling, not just Americans, all over the world. People are struggling with mental health issues, whether it's just minor or maybe major, but just reminding yourself that the majority, a lot of people are dealing with anxiety or depression, and that helps you to feel less strange and just sort of more normal. I think realizing that this is a common thing breeds confidence. So you have to keep reminding yourself, this is common. This is okay. It's okay for me to feel this way, and this is a psychological issue. This is a medical issue. This is not like a character problem. It's not like I'm not a strong person. That doesn't have anything to do with it. It's a medical issue. And it's a medical issue, Jay, that a lot of people struggle with. And I think people are coming out of the closet with it more and more. I'm writing a book, and it's coming out next year. And for me, writing this book was a huge step in coming out of my own closet. Just telling the truth about how much depression has overshadowed my life was a great healing factor. And my daughter, the depressed daughter, committed suicide last year, Jay. And so writing this book about it was really helpful for me in processing all the grief. So I think what was most helpful was just being able to be honest with myself, and then honest with, those people who are reading my blog, those people who are going to be buying my book, those people who are going to be listening to me on the radio, and saying, all of us struggle with something. It just happens that some of us struggle with mental illness, and it doesn't mean anything about us. It just means it's what we were given to deal with in this life, right?
So, Nina, what was your daughter's name?
Her name was Mariah.
Mariah. And when's this book going to come out? Do you have a release date yet?
It'll be February of 2015.
Okay. And you've written several books in the past. I believe you have several on poetry.
Yeah. I've got a trilogy, 3 books of modern poetry. You can find them on Amazon or my website. And then I've also got the recovery workbook called Never Enough. And readers have actually shared with me that the workbook has helped them to overcome anxiety and worry thinking and depression. So it's actually a book that I wrote for specifically for addiction, recovery from addiction, and recovery from OCD and eating disorders. But people have actually used it for anxiety and worry as well.
And where could listeners pick up a copy of the book?
You can go to Amazon, just look up Nina Bingham, and you'll see it there. Or you can go to my website, and that's www.living-enlightened.com.
I like that URL.
Thank you.
All right, and we'll have links to everything that we discussed in this episode in the show notes. Let's before we wrap up here, Nina, we like to ask all our guests about purpose. And really, it's a 2-part question. One, do you know what your purpose in life is? And secondly, how would you recommend somebody who doesn't know what their purpose is, who hasn't defined it yet, go about doing that?
Okay, I like that question. My purpose in life is, at this point, to support suicide survivors like myself and people living with mental illness so that they know that they're not alone. And I think to talk with teens about fighting suicide, fighting depression and suicide. How people find their purpose. You know, Jay, I feel like people's purposes are already in their hearts. And when I say that, what I mean is we don't just stumble on our purpose. I think that we just need to listen to it. You know, for example, I wanted to be a writer way back in the 4th grade, but I didn't let myself until I was in my 40s because I didn't have enough confidence in myself. So my advice is to discover whatever you're passionate about doing. And then once you've discovered that, I think you've discovered your purpose.
Nina, that's great advice. I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your thoughts on anxiety with our listeners. And when your new book comes out next year, I hope you come back on and tell us all about it.
Thank you, Jay. I would love to. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Conquer Worry Show. For additional resources, please visit us at conquerworry.org. We can also be found on social media. Connect with us on Twitter at twitter.com/conquerworry or on Facebook at facebook.com/conquerworry. And new episodes can be found on YouTube at youtube.com/conquerworryshow.